like we're ready. It's July 9th, and District Court Administration Budget Hearing. We can start right now. Who's up?
Do you mind if I take my mask off?
Sure.
Good morning, Commissioners. Lee Welch, Court Administrator, Shawnee County District Court, 3rd Judicial District. With me this morning is Chief Judge Richard Anderson, Stephanie Teal, our Director of Information Services, and Amanda Wilson, CSO 3, who's also our Drug Court Program Coordinator. I'll give you a brief overview of our court operations, and then we'll talk a little bit about our 2021 budget request, and then wrap up with our 5-year CIP plan. The district court budget is composed of, or funded from 2 primary sources. The state of Kansas through the Supreme Court's Office of Judicial Administration and the Shawnee County Board of County Commissioners. The state provides funding for our personnel and benefits, but not all. Shawnee County obviously provides our operating budget, but also provides funding for 3 full-time employees, which is 1 staff attorney and 2 members of our IT team. We also have 7 intermittent law clerks and 1 intermittent Spanish interpreter. For the first time since 2019, we have a full bench, and we're hoping to keep it that way, at least for the foreseeable future. In the last year, we've had 2 retirements. Judge Brown retired in mid-July. Judge Tice retired at the end of July 2019, and at that time, he was the longest tenured district judge in the state of Kansas with over 42 years of service on the bench. We've also had 1 judge who was appointed to the Supreme Court as a justice, which was Justice Wilson. We had 3 new judges and obviously 1 pandemic, so it's been a little bit of a crazy year for the courts, just as it has been for everyone. Some of the accomplishments and challenges that we're, as a court, are facing are the fact that our court is extremely busy. We have 16 divisions, and once again, Shawnee County has the highest caseload per district judge of any district in the state. Last year, there were over 37,000 cases filed in the Shawnee County District Court. Some of our judges' rulings affect laws that impact the entire state, and some are as I don't want to say minimal, I don't want to minimize their importance, but can be traffic infractions or drug possession paraphernalia charges. Regardless, each and every case that comes before the court is extremely important to the court, as it is to the people who are involved in those cases. I've always told my staff that it's our job. It seems kind of menial sometimes. It's our job, but it's those people's lives when they're in court participating in a case. So we have to treat it just as it's as important as it would be for them. We continue to focus on courtroom renovations. We have to be efficient and effective, or we'll become overwhelmed in our daily processes. Accessible courtrooms and technology are extremely important and critical for the work of the courts. Obviously, these things require constant attention, and especially in a dated building that we're all occupying, and a building that was not designed for today's technology needs and requirements, it is critical, and it does cost a lot of money, and we're well aware of that fact. We continue to go through the process of cyclical maintenance. At this time, all of our courtrooms and all of our chambers have been recarpeted and repainted. The only spaces, the primary spaces that haven't received attention are the chamber restrooms. So we're slowly working through the process of getting some 1970s wallpaper taken down and replaced with some fresh paint. As all of you are aware, we have the ever-present and continuing need for some sort of a jury assembly room or large gathering space. The longer potential jurors are required to mingle in the 3rd and 4th floor hallways. the longer we tempt fate that there will result in a mistrial or a possible injury to the public, a witness, or even the litigants or the inmate. Simply, it isn't a wise idea to have shackled inmates being paraded through the halls in front of their victims, their accusers, potential jurors, or witnesses. All of those things really we need to focus some attention on how to eliminate that intermingling of people in the hallways. Obviously, everything costs more now than it did a decade ago. Attorney fees are one of the highest dollar amounts we spend out of our budget. Private attorney fees for court cases can run from $225 an hour to over $400 an hour. The Board of Indigent Defense Services currently pays their attorneys $80 an hour. Here in Shawnee County, we're paying $62 an hour. We have appointed a committee to look at indigent defense and attorney appointment contracts. We're hoping, obviously this has kind of taken a back burner to anything COVID related right now, but the goal of that committee is to find some resolution, some way to either revise our fee schedule, revise the structure of our contracts so that we can make those contracts more competitive and more attractive to attorneys, all the while taking care of utilizing the dollars you give us in the best way possible. Training is another area where we're constantly battling. Judges are requiring ongoing training with increased use of technology. It requires all sorts of new training on programs and processes for staff and judges as well. However, Shawnee County still leads the state in the use of court technology. Not only do courts from across the state look to Shawnee County for forms and business processes, but the Office of Judicial Administration also comes to Shawnee County for programming assistance and support on a lot of their programs. So we are at the forefront of court technology as far as the judicial branch goes in the state of Kansas, and we're very proud of that fact. The Office of Judicial Administration is implementing a statewide case management system called Odyssey. Shawnee County was scheduled to go online with Odyssey in June of this year. Because of the court closures and county closures, that entire schedule was put on hold. We're now looking at maybe November-ish. We've not been given a solid date. In fact, the planning process hasn't even come back online yet. So because of that and some additional programming requirements that Shawnee County is going to need to have done so that we can maintain our current level of efficiency, we still are not certain when our go-live date is, but it will be a huge change for us and for our judges, and we're trying to maintain as much of our current efficiencies as we can. Obviously, the COVID crisis is affecting the courts as it is every other county office. We had the implementation of our COOP. Now we're starting the phases of the de-escalation process, which actually is more time-consuming and more difficult than the initial implementation. Group size limitations, face covering requirements, additional cleaning for the courts, barriers being put in place. It all creates a lot of additional stress and a lot of additional cost that we're all in the midst of. Due to the Supreme Court order, jury trials are, for the most part, on hold for the immediate future. We do have a committee composed of our jury coordinator, myself, a couple of our trial judges, and our managing court reporter to look at jury trials and how we can efficiently and effectively bring jury trials back to Shawnee County. We're looking at a number of off-site locations to do jury selection. And, how do we manage a jury with 6-foot distancing? It's tough, to say the least. Anyway, we truly appreciate the many ways that you, the commissioners, and the county have communicated with us and worked with us over the years. And we do work very strongly and very diligently to be good stewards of the taxpayer dollars that you entrust us with. We don't spend it if we don't have to. So, any questions on operations as I knock everything out from inside the podium?
This year, have you had to do many Zoom meetings using your courts and dealing with inmates from the jail and things like that, or has that been a
Yes.
tough issue?
We're doing a lot of Zoom meetings. In fact, the request from the Supreme Court is that as many hearings as possible be done via audio, video, two-way communication, whether it's Zoom, BlueJean, WebEx, PEX IP, whatever the format. We're doing as many as we can remotely.
Are you well set up for that at this point, or has that been?
I'll defer to Judge Anderson.
Okay.
We are doing our best to implement Zoom technology where we can, and I see some great opportunities, for instance, with the jail in particular, as one application. If we could improve our Zoom capacity, we would eliminate transporting a great percentage of prisoners. And I think we have learned that during this pandemic when we've tried to struggle with application of the technology that's available. But we're finding in a lot of our different functions, it's kind of clunky right now. There are a lot of trials and errors, and the Zoom will go down in one place, and it's a challenge, but I think it's a challenge that is worth undertaking for the court, and I think probably for the commission if you're thinking about at least improving the facilities at the jail and those sorts of things.
In some cases, is this the choice of the accused, whether they come in face to face, or do they have that right?
Like everything else, it's a struggle. If you look at Kansas statutes, we talk, particularly in criminal, about in-person appearances. And those initially were construed to require somebody to be in the courtroom to give a plea so that you could be aware of a knowing and voluntary plea being given, fully informed, and so forth. As we have gone forward, the Supreme Court has entered administrative orders that sort of invite a different analysis of what in-person means. Now, probably the legislature is going to have to weigh in on some of these things. The court's going to have to rethink a few of these things. And the bar and the public are going to have to perhaps change an approach too. But that is all in flux. Going back a few years when we started to do search warrants remotely, we used to think, well, the judge had to be placed in a county. Well, now virtually you can be anywhere in the world and review a search warrant request. So those kinds of issues are in flux, not necessarily settled. I personally will say that my experience is Zoom, you can see and hear, but you can't taste, touch, and smell. You can't reproduce that courtroom setting where you can cut the atmosphere. It's so tense, but we're trying.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
It was mentioned that we have a higher caseload than any of the other district courts. Is the reason for that because of the capital, or because our crime is so high, or are we just,
nope.
our law enforcement's really good at catching bad guys, or?
No, it is actually, if it goes back in history, and this is something that people may not know, and I take no credit for it because I was such a young lawyer, but back at least in the late 80s or early 90s, Shawnee County was the first court in the world to move toward the technology applications. And that has helped process cases, and I think it has also allowed us to do the caseload that we have, which is larger per judge, and we keep more, our judges are able to do more cases because we've been out in front of the other counties on the technology primarily. If you compare the caseloads per judge with Wyandotte, Sedgwick, and so forth, we are ahead. Call it more efficiency or just our processes generally or our culture. I don't know the answers. It's not that we have more crime or anything like that. We do get cases that other jurisdictions don't get, particularly in civil, where you have state implications on things like pollution and those kind of cases. They'll come here. They're filed here because we are the state capital. But no more crime probably than anybody else, maybe a little less in some areas. But we just have, I'm very proud to say we efficiently handle our caseload. This has been very troubling during the shutdown because we've all had burdens on our ability to do that. And working with the public, they have certain expectations of what could happen, when it can happen, and we've slowed those processes down. But very proud of how we've handled our cases historically, and proud that we were kind of the first in the world with the technology advance.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
See if I can make this work. So pretty much, I've overviewed for you the role of the court and some of our concerns and accomplishments. A few other things of note. We, up until the time of the court closure, we were still utilizing the therapy dog program, which is in partnership with Pet Partners, and that has been extremely helpful to a lot of our litigants, especially in the juvenile departments. That is a no cost to the county. It's a volunteer program that everyone seems to really benefit from. We have put the North Annex project kind of on hold due to additional priorities. Our goal there, if you've ever visited the North Annex, it's a disaster. We need to sort and inventory, rebox a lot of our files, get them moved to a secure location up there. That location's been set aside. We just haven't had the time or the resources, mainly staff resources, to be able to get that project undertaken. Drug court in Shawnee County, I'll talk a little bit more about later, but it continues to be a very successful program. And during this pandemic and period of closure, we've been able to successfully telework in all areas of the district court. Here's a real brief look at our 21 budget request. If you'll notice, our 2020 budget request was $2.370 and $576. We're requesting an increase of $20,000, which will put us back to the 19 budget level. And that budget level in 2019 has been the same since approximately 2010. The reason 2020 is different is solely because of a miscalculation on my part. Had to do with miscalculating some expenses and benefits, some costs related to our law clerk positions. So the increase we're requesting is less than 1% over 2020. It takes us back to a flat rate back through 2010, which is $2,390,000, $722. We are budgeting truly only the minimum of what we need to operate. We use everything we're allocated. We don't have much wiggle room at all. And we feel that we've been very frugal with the taxpayer dollars that you've entrusted to us. As I said, that difference is solely due to an error, a miscalculation on my part. So I'll take full responsibility for that. By far the greatest expenditure out of our court budget is attorney fees. And as you can see, over 1/3 of our budget is spent on attorney fees. You can look at the number of contracts. We have 24 total contracts. You can look at how those are broken down. This number, almost $750,000, does not include any non-contract or conflict cases, any appeals, or any cases involving sexually violent predators. So the amount of money we spend on attorney fees is substantially higher than this $750. This is simply for the contract attorneys we have.
I might just pipe in here. A lot of the attorneys are doing it more as a public service. I mean, the word long-term contract holders, a lot of them are doing it because they're very passionate, I mean, working with juveniles or working with foster care cases, and so they could be earning much more than what they are being compensated for, but they're doing it for the public service, more or less.
Correct.
But it's been a number of years since we've had any adjustment to that rate. I mean, it's been at least
2014 was the last adjustment I'm aware of, and that was $100 per month.
And so, again, it's been, that's 6 years, going on now 7 years, and that increase was the court had also mandated that they all have professional malpractice insurance, and looking at that the average malpractice insurance was going to run about $1,200 a year. So it was really not a net gain for many of the attorneys. And so when we're looking at that, I mean, I know that's a big portion, but we also have $80,000 for our staff attorney position, research attorney. That's actually mandated by the Office of Judicial Administration. That falls under their responsibility, but the Office of Judicial Administration had cut that position, and that's when Shawnee County picked up that position as part of that. Has there been any ongoing discussions with the Office of Judicial Administration as to when they might resume paying for that? Because again, that's a responsibility of the Office of Judicial Administration that we picked up because we do have education cases. We have everything of high profile lands in Shawnee County, and we need qualified staff attorneys to help research these, again, statewide interest cases land on our desks.
I would agree, and I can honestly say I have not, in my tenure with OJA, and specifically since I've been here, heard any word of them even considering picking up positions. In fact, they're under a very strict hiring freeze right now. There's at least two courts that I know of that don't even have a clerk of the court because OJA won't allow them to fill those positions.
But that was our fear when we took it on, that the minute we take it on, OJA would write it off, and then we're stuck with it forever. But by statute, we have to pay for the appointed counsel.
Right.
We're required by statute to provide competent counsel, and it's to be done, I mean, there's been prior lawsuits when it hits a threshold of, is it even economical, or is it, paying them at too low of a rate? I would ask, again, I know that once we set a budget for the courts are able to allocate as they see fit. But again, going for 6 years without any increase to your appointed counsel, that's a long stretch.
I agree. And that's part of what we're wanting this committee to look at is there a way that we can restructure the contracts, perhaps increase the dollar figures to the contract and reduce the number of contracts, or some sort of equation so that it is more attractive and more equitable to the attorneys who are involved.
And I really fully appreciate that, but in the 10 years that I spent as a guardian ad litem, our caseload in representing children, I mean, as a guardian ad litem, you're appointed to represent children. We had an average caseload of representing between 300 and 400 children at any point. And so when you look at the total amount of children in foster care in Topeka, we rank number 3 or number 4 consistently in foster care, right behind Wyandotte and Sedgwick. And so, I mean, Shawnee County had on average between 1,200 and 1,600 kids in foster care. And so that's a big, big number. And so we need to have, I mean, when you hit that 300 or 400, how are you able to really get out and be knowing what's going on those cases? So again, I would just caution, I'm all for efficiency, I'm all for looking at what we can do, but I would hate to see us go to a further extreme of increasing our caseload to the point that we're not able to effectively do our jobs.
I agree. And as this committee meets and comes up with some recommendations, you know, there may well be a price tag attached to that we'll have to come back and request. But like you said, we are required to provide legal services for parties who are appearing as litigants in the court. And, you know, we're doing the best we can to make sure that happens.
And again, the only reason I bring it up is, again, to highlight the difference between appointed counsel that we're required to do by statute and a staff attorney that we're not required to do, but we took on that responsibility when OJA cut it, because it is so key and critical that we have that assistance to the court on these very critical cases of statewide impact.
And I agree, the staff attorney and the
I see.
law clerks provided invaluable service to this court.
I see Judge Anderson.
I'd just like to ask like one question, because you have had the experience that you had. What, in this day and age, would be a fair rate for those contract attorneys?
And you know, I think that the contracts were always designed to be a part-time position, but when you hit a threshold that you're putting in 30-plus hours a week because of court hearings and commitments to the court, it becomes more of your full-time job, and it really impacts. And so I would just ask the court to look at, again, the amount of time that you're putting into the cases, because there's a lot of times with dockets and trials and other court hearings, it's not an option of whether you're at it or not. And so I would just ask the court and the committee to look at how many hours are you really putting in? And I know the court has looked at that in the past.
Well, we have to strike a balance, because we have to provide effective representation. And
Right.
if we don't, then the lawsuits come and there's an amount imposed upon us. But it'd be very helpful. We've tried to maintain our budget pretty flat for a good period of
Right.
time. So if you've got
Yeah.
suggestions on what that rate ought to be, that would be helpful. We try very carefully to keep a fair rate, keep the positions filled, and it's getting harder and harder to have people interested in those positions.
Sure.
But they're critical.
And again, this is just my yearly, and then this is your first time hearing this as the chief judge, but this is my yearly quest and my yearly advocacy for looking at that appointed counsel, because again, the courts, once we set the budget, are able to take your money and allocate it in the ways that you see fit. And so this is my only chance again to advocate. I mean, I think this is Betty Griner's 8th time of hearing me advocate for this.
Yeah. I hope you're advocating to your two partners.
And
up here.
but
Or
again,
at least one of us.
yeah,
Yeah.
at least, I mean, kind of telling, I mean, again, it's one of those things that we look at, because when you just look at a number and you go, wow, that's $750,000, that's $750,000 going to appointed counsel. That seems like an awful lot. But when you break it down, I mean, for a person that is working as a guardian ad litem, and you're representing 300 children, that number gets pretty small pretty quick.
Well, give me your proposal on what is a fair rate, because that is a problem that's developing. And when we're told the state's going to be about 750 million short, and OJA is saying we can't fill positions and doing things like that, we're all going to be under a lot of stress. We're willing to work with you as a court, reallocating within our budget certain types of things. But this is expensive for everybody, we understand.
And I get it, and I think the committee, I mean, having a committee formed and working with the committee and the appointed counsel, I mean, the appointed counsel, they're on the front lines. They know what it is, and they would have a better idea of what their hours are. Again, I'm 9 years removed from being one of those people on that front line.
Yeah. Well, we are presently rethinking some of the ways we run our dockets, and the demands on the council in some ways may increase, may decrease in some certain respects, but it is a hard job, and we do expect a lot. I know they're producing well for us, and I hope we can maintain those positions.
Right.
Whoops, sorry, going the wrong way. Just few more notes about some of our Shawnee County employees. As I said, we have 3 full-time Shawnee County employees, 2 computer court technology specialists. Their duties include network and firewall administration, courtroom technology, audio-video expertise, as well as computer support. These 2 gentlemen, we literally couldn't live without. They are invaluable to the court. Carol Ruth Bonebrake serves as our staff attorney that Kevin referenced a few minutes ago. She manages the 7 intermittent law clerk positions. They provide research for the judges. She serves as a mentor to them. She has also helped us immeasurably by serving on some of our internal committees as well as chairing our IT committee. And she's also working to provide CLE training for our judges in-house. The 7 intermittent law clerk positions, then Susana Valdivino serves as an intermittent Spanish interpreter for us. Due to the fact her husband is a high risk, has some high risk tendencies, she's not been working at all during this court closure period, but we hope to have her back in a month or 2.
Before we go on, Mr. Chairman, we had a discussion yesterday during the IT, information technology budget hearing, talking about what is in-house versus what is out-of-house, so to speak. And Pat Oblander had talked about wanting to keep as many things within information technology with Parks and Recreation, and not creating different embedded IT people in all the different departments. And so we had asked, what about the courts? The courts have their own technology group and their own IT department. And why do we have 2 separate? And again, just talking about why do we have 2 separate and what are they looking at? And are those the best, or should they be combined? And I know that we've had it as long as I can remember. I don't know that they've ever been combined, but they've always operated independently from each other with their own different, even down to the servers and technology and computers, and they're just 2 different departments. And why we have 2 different IT, and again, for the new commissioner, Mays, and also not so new, but still relatively new Commissioner Rippon, why we have 2 IT departments instead of 1?
I can touch on that briefly, but I'll most likely defer to Stephanie on this one. The county, I believe that the court needs vary significantly from what the county needs are. Our programming is very specific to case flow management and integrations for our cases, whereas the county's needs are very specific to county functions. I don't think there's any reason it can't be looked at. Whether it's a realistic or feasible outcome is beyond a discussion I think we could probably have right now, but I'll defer to Stephanie if you'd like to address that.
I just might note that it's been this way since, as far as I can remember, we've had 2, but I think.
Correct. I'm Stephanie Teal. I'm the IT director for the district court. Our objectives are different. The county objectives and missions are completely different than what the court's objectives and missions are. Our IT departments have historically always been separate, and I refuse to hear we've always done it that way. We did study it about 10 years ago, and we did combine as many services as we possibly could and still keep our autonomy. There's a lot of historic and politics behind it. Those chapters have passed us, and it is probably a good time to reevaluate that. There are, different statutory and personnel rules that we're state employees, and being supervised by a county agency is just not available in the state world. And so there's a lot of balls that have to be juggled, but I think it would be a good time to probably reevaluate what we could. But I agree with Pat, keeping as many things internal protects you not only from a cybersecurity standpoint, a financial standpoint, but as a workflow standpoint. You can create your own workflows and be unique to address efficiencies to meet the county's objectives, because Shawnee County is different than any other county in the United States, as is our court. As Judge Anderson explained, we were one of the first courts in the world to move towards a technology environment. We were the first court in the world to do electronic filing. So there are different aspects and different missions.
You might want to watch these too, though, because Pat did mention that he was looking at trying to steal IT employees from other departments. So if they're any good, you might want to watch them.
Isn't there somebody in Parks and Rec?
Yeah.
Yes, there is.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, I know. George and Jared are just absolutely amazing, and we would not be as successful as we are as a court without these two, especially during these pandemic months that we have been with their boots on the ground. They've been absolutely wonderful. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, I don't really have much to add on that subject. When we were talking about it internally today, I said to LeDon, we'd have to warn the commissioners, because we would be like a Pandora's box taking it in with, our demands and needs, and especially during this coronavirus crisis. It's just been very, very difficult with our IT people. They have been scrambling and doing a wonderful job for us. So I didn't really have anything to add other than it's a tremendous need for everybody in this day and age, and we're proud of our folks.
I guess I would see the court's information technology needs are going to do nothing but increase. The COVID has really highlighted where our main deficiency is, and to go to a more virtual court presence. And so I think that what we're going to see is more progression towards where can we integrate technology into the court, and moving more away from the physical, but more what hearings can be done virtually. And so I just see that as being an increasing need for the courts.
It's the Department of Corrections trying to build out their technology so they can interface with
Yes.
us.
At the beginning of the COVID, Dr. Pizzino had asked how the courts were situated, and my comment was we were closer to the 19th century than the 21st century with the courts. Because we're just now doing electronic filing. So we're getting there, but
Been doing that since 1997.
yeah, but getting everybody else, the
Oh,
state,
yeah.
online, it's a slow progression. So.
Our jail has done a magnificent job on controlling safety.
Yes, absolutely.
The biggest challenges that we have as a court, we can't control. Just like we've talked about attorney fees, jury expenses, technology, maintaining staff. We have probably 20 vacancies on the judicial branch side in the Shawnee County District Court right now. Also, upgrading our courtrooms is one of those needs that we have. One of the ongoing needs we have and requests is for some sort of jury assembly room or a large multi-purpose courtroom. Listed here are some of the challenges we have, trying to process orientation for jurors in multiple courtrooms, having to relocate equipment between courtrooms for orientation, the inmates traveling the hallways in front of potential jurors, and obviously the new safety requirements that require social distancing. If there were a possibility for a large multi-purpose room, I know this is one thing that Judge Wilson had talked about previously when she was chief judge. If we could devise some sort of a large room that could be divided, perhaps for a meeting room and a courtroom, or opened up for a jury assembly space. The list of dockets that's shown there, the Monday through Friday, these are all dockets that are aside from our 16 judges' normal dockets. These are typically handled by pro tems. So these are additional courtrooms we have to find on a weekly basis. And this does not take into account the limited actions docket that's held at Ag Hall on Tuesdays. We also have in normal operating times, senior judges who may be assigned to specific cases where our judges have recused for various reasons, and then these pro tem appointments. So we do have a large need for additional space. We continue with our courtroom renovations. In the 2020 CIP requests, we had requested 3 courtrooms to be upgraded. We graciously received funding for 2 of those courtrooms, 308 and 312. As I said, those will be funded through capital outlay funds. We voluntarily pulled the plug on going forward with those renovations when the COVID crisis first began. I'd contacted Betty and said, is it okay if I do this? We just don't think it's the right time. And she was basically overjoyed that I wanted to put the brakes on something. Obviously, the contractors weren't quite as ecstatic. All of our courtrooms that have been renovated have been ADA compliant to the public. We've had the opportunity, if you will, to look at the needs for judicial compliance as well. So all of the courtrooms that will be, our goal is for all of the courtrooms that are renovated from here forward will also be ADA compliant for the judge. That had increased the cost just a little bit, but I think it's worth it in the long run not to have to throw something together at the last minute if we need. There's also a breakdown here of what courtrooms are upgraded with technology and what ones we have yet to upgrade. This is an example of courtroom 311, which is basically our misdemeanor first appearance courtroom. This was upgraded in 2019 and is pretty much a benchmark, just as 408 is. These are kind of our templates, if you will, for our courtroom redesigns. Judge Ludke's courtroom, room 300, was upgraded immediately following 311, and here's a before and after picture of that space. It's a much more efficient use of floor space. It's more efficient for the judge. He or she has additional working surface areas. It provides additional space for support staff as well. In 2019, those 2 contracts, there were some excess contingency funds available, and that money was repurposed with your permission to provide bench modifications for the majority of our courtrooms. And what that did was we built a shelf underneath the bench, allowed the monitors to be recessed so the judges have a better sight line into the courtroom. It also gives them a cleaner work surface without all the monitors on the surface of the bench. There was only one courtroom we couldn't upgrade, and that's because the bench space is about 12 inches deep. So there's barely room for a monitor to sit, and there was no way to recess that monitor. But it does make for a cleaner look in the courtroom, and it does help the judge be able to see what's going on the other side of the bench. One of our biggest hurdles, if you will, right now is jury management. Even though we don't have juries taking place right now, it's a constant focus on how to manage juries. There's a lot of information coming in, a lot of information being exchanged, and right now it's pretty much, it's a very manual procedure, even though it's automated. Here's a breakdown, if you will, of what our 2019 jury trials look like, as well as the costs associated. We know that when jury trials begin again, our yield rate is going to drop significantly. So we're going to have to call in or summons even more jurors than we do on a regular basis, because we know people are going to have concerns with COVID. They're going to have additional health risks that require them to stay out of public areas. The 17,000 jurors summoned, that includes, those are initial summonses that are sent out. Those people didn't all come into the court. Those include some people that were disqualified for statutory reasons. They were not 18 yet. They weren't a resident of Shawnee County. We seem to have a lot of people that live on those county lines that live in one county, but their address is in another. So that 17,000 people didn't actually come into court. But we know that the dollar figure, we assume that the dollar figure is going to go up because of the lower yield. And we're going, like I said, we're going to have to be calling in more jurors to get the same number of bodies in the courtroom. Commissioner Cook, did you have a question?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Thank you.
It looked like you did, so I wanted to make sure.
I got wheels turning, but not for you.
Okay, good deal. So one of the things we're looking at is we have it's called Jury Services Incorporated. That's the software program we use to manage our juries. This statewide case management system, which is called Odyssey, is also supposed to have a jury component. As of this time, Tyler Technologies, which owns Odyssey, has not yet signed a contract with a vendor. No, that's incorrect. Tyler Technologies has not signed a contract with the Office of Judicial Administration for that jury component. So at this time, we're sticking with our current jury management system. And in some discussions I've had with Stephanie, I think we're going to find a way to make that system a little more efficient, doing some online questionnaires and possibly some check-in they can do electronically. Perhaps even be able to take care of statutory disqualifications due to residency or age remotely, instead of having to pay all these jurors to come in only to excuse them when they get here. That is a huge inefficiency and waste of money that we'd like to circumvent. When Odyssey comes out with their jury program, I think our goal is to take a look at it and see if it'll work for the needs of Shawnee County. Obviously, if it does, that would save us even more money because we pay an annual maintenance fee for the jury system we have now. To upgrade the system, to do all the electronic things we'd like it to do, is in excess of $25,000. If Stephanie feels her team can do a very close replication of this, we're gonna let them have at it and see if we can't make something work in the meantime. But we know that the Odyssey jury program won't be available when we go live. We're all aware of the Chandler case. Our latest information is that it's perhaps still scheduled in the first quarter of '21, provided jury trials are back and functioning as they're supposed to be by then. Judge Rios has been assigned to hear that case, which has been a much more efficient process than having a retired judge hear that case. The communications are much better. We expect this to be a huge burden on the county. And you again were graciously allowed us to set aside the balance of our 2019 budget, setting out there in a special project fund to assist in offsetting those costs for the court and the county. Anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks, I believe, is what Judge Rios is anticipating for this trial between jury selection and actual trial time. We also have the Mendez case coming up, which is going to be another high-profile case, not quite as expensive or probably as lengthy as the Chandler case, but that's another one that's going to eat up some resources as well.
Can I make a comment?
Absolutely.
One. Mainly for Commissioner Mays' information. When she talks about the jurors being paid, these are for the trials. The grand jury is paid out of the general fund because of the way the statute is written,
Okay.
or general expenses.
Okay.
So this does not include grand jurors. That was all.
Okay, perfect. Some of the highlights of our court technology department. We're working on upgrading our courtrooms as we can with increased audio, visual, and technology. We do have our new website was ready to go live the first part of April when the world shut down, and it's kind of taken a back seat. Unfortunately, we have just a couple reviews to make, and then it's ready to go live. That's been a huge project. One of our programmers, Chris Rouse, was the lead person in charge of that, and he did an absolutely amazing job. Again, a lot of their time is spent dealing with the statewide case management system, doing validation and cleanup of data. We're not only verifying data that's being transmitted or being converted from full court to Odyssey, but we're also going back and checking a lot of that information that was converted from our legacy system to full court, just to make sure that the data that we start with in Odyssey is good. The electronic submission and approval of guardianship conservatorship reports is a huge time saving. This is one of the projects that we're working really hard to get OJA to buy into so that we can maintain these efficiencies. Otherwise, we're going to have to clone Judge Anderson to approve all those reports when they come in by the thousands the first part of each year. The COVID-19 business continuity functions, obviously, Stephanie and her team have been inundated with trying to keep everyone processing, getting everyone outfitted and set up to work remotely, and they have done an absolutely fabulous job. As I said, we're beginning in the beginning stages of de-escalation and trying to identify what exactly our new normal is. We have a great number of our staff that are working from home, and our systems department still has to support them even if they're not here. So that's an additional burden on them. The jury system that I just talked about, our Odyssey go-live date anticipated later this year. And one of the projects that Judge Osman was really working hard on was a self-help center located in B22. And we were getting close to having that ready to roll, and the world shut down. You're getting tired of hearing me say that, but when everything came to a screeching halt, as I know you're aware, but I hate to say that we have so many projects that have gotten put on hold, but our main focus was keeping the doors open and the lights on, and that's where all of our attention has been. Our court services department has continued supervision throughout this entire closure. They've maintained that supervision through telephone, video, Zoom hearings, Zoom communications, go-to meetings, any form of video communication that works for their client, they're using in order to maintain supervision. We would really like to give a shout out to Pat Oblander and his team for assisting with the phone issues in that department. The problem we had was we could forward the phone lines, the office phone lines, to our supervisors' personal cell phones, but if they were to call their client, that client would then have the officer's personal cell phone number. The phone system that the county has a way to mask that phone number, so it just shows as a generic courthouse number. So that assistance provided by Pat and Brian was invaluable for keeping our court services officers in touch with their clients. We are back to doing in-person supervision of high and medium risk clients. Due to the safety issues of going into homes, field team services and in-home visits have been suspended for the time being and will probably be suspended for the near future anyway. Court services maintains a supervision count of well over 1,500 clients. About 950 of those are adult, the majority of those being misdemeanors, about 2 to 1 over felonies, and about between 500 and 600 juveniles, and those are split pretty evenly between juvenile offender and SINK cases. Here are some of the highlights statistically for our 2019 drug court program. At the present time, we have 23 clients that are currently participating in drug court. A huge thank you and debt of gratitude to Amanda Wilson and to Judge Osman for spearheading and maintaining drug court. It's a tremendously valuable asset to the community and to the citizens of Shawnee County. The current model that we use is post-conviction, pre-sentence bond. The participants have entered a plea of guilty to a drug felony or a felony drug-related crime, and they're facing presumptive prison sentences. The participants in drug court are released on bond with a stipulation that they participate and complete the drug court program. Sentencing is then continued until completion. Once they successfully complete, they'll receive a sentencing departure and ultimately avoid incarceration. We do have graduation ceremonies for all of our drug court participants. We have cake, and we make it a big deal for them. It's a huge accomplishment for them to make it through drug court and to avoid prison. And I know some of you have attended those. If you have attended those, if you haven't, you need to. The pride on their faces is amazing, to have such an amazing accomplishment. It's really a sight to behold. Unfortunately, when a participant is unsuccessfully discharged from the program, their bond's revoked, and they go right back to the sentencing phase of their case. As of now, we have 12 court reporters covering 16 divisions. We have 4 traditional steno writers and 8 voice writers, and we have 2 vacancies, which we cannot fill. All of our reporters were set up to report and do their work remotely during the closure. And in fact, on a daily basis, we have reporters who are participating via Zoom to record those hearings, and it's working quite well. Jen Olson is our new managing court reporter, and she's doing a great job of maintaining the service throughout this pandemic. We had a meeting a couple weeks ago about the COVID relief fund money, and this is just kind of a little update on some of the things we're going to be submitting requests for upcoming expenditures. To date, we've spent over $40,000 on laptops. We've purchased over 40 laptops, over 60 webcams. We purchased a few portable monitors, some licensing, Zoom licensing, and we've started using a program called JotForm, which provides a fillable form interface. So these are some of the things we're looking at. That's my next project after today, is to get those lined out into Betty so we can keep moving and keep the county on track with requesting those funds. Any questions on the budget before we go to capital improvement? As we said previously, our budget is tight enough that we don't have the funds available to do a lot of improvements on our own. So we rely on the capital outlay funds to do that. So for 2020, we had the renovation funding for courtrooms 308 and 312, and we're hoping to get back on track with that at some point in time. However, right now, we're just back to a full bench. We're trying to get court back on track for whatever our new normal is. Our dockets are so far behind. I don't really feel comfortable in closing down 2 of our courtrooms to renovate them right now. So we'll, when the county's ready to take on those projects again, we'll look long and hard at doing 2 at the same time. That was our goal, to save some money. Was the contractors had said they would do both of them at the same time and cut us a deal on labor. I'm not really sure how feasible that's going to be when we're so backlogged the way it is. But we will manage to get that done whenever you give us the green light. Again, here's just a current, most all of our CIP requests you're going to notice are for courtroom renovation. This is a current small courtroom design. This is one of the templates. This is actually Judge Anderson's courtroom. This is one of the templates for our new courtroom design, which they're all looking similar to this. The 2 courtrooms that were approved for renovation in 2020 were 308, which is occupied by our newest judge, Lori Doherty Bixel. The numbers that are on here are strictly estimates because when we were planning to do these renovations in February, March of 2020, KBS and Highland Millwork and SciTech were all willing to use the same quotes they had given us previously. 6 to 9 months later, I'm not sure they're going to be able to do the same thing, but these are the numbers that we based our requests on. This is Judge Mativi's courtroom, 312, and that one is also on tap to be renovated using 2020 capital outlay money. So the 21 capital improvement requests, we received Betty's request for our proposals. We didn't feel it was prudent at the time to request capital outlay money for 21. We knew that COVID was putting a huge burden on the county, and we knew that we didn't have our 2020 upgrades taken care of yet. So we chose to deviate from our 5-year plan and say, no, we don't want to request anything for 21, and we just pushed everything back. So for 22, what we're looking at is that one courtroom that didn't get approved for 20, we'll slip that into year 2022, which is courtroom 304, occupied by Administrative Hearing Officer Lori Yockers. And there's a photo of her courtroom at present. Her courtroom is also the one that has the 11.5-inch bench. So you really can't even put a legal pad up there unless you turn it sideways to write. It's very, very small. Again, this was a pricing quote that was given to us back in 2019, probably early 2019. So that's what we're looking at, a single request for 22. And then 23 would be the redesign and construction of courtroom 301, which is Judge Osman. His courtroom was originally scheduled for 21, so we moved everything back 2 years. This courtroom is just horribly designed. The judge's desk and computer monitor are visible to the public. The public walks behind the judge to enter his office. The jury and the judge, there's not a good place in the courtroom to present evidence that both the judge and the jury can see. So really the design is just very poor, and the design as presented was to basically flip-flop and put the judge's bench on the far side of the room and put the jury box closer to the door. And it does come with a much higher price tag because of the relocation of so much of the furniture in that room. For 2024, our request is the redesign and renovation of courtroom 326, which is currently occupied by Judge Watson. Since this photo was taken, the wallpaper has been taken down, it's been freshly painted, and does have new carpet. So it would simply be improving the efficiencies of the bench and the support staff, as well as technology upgrades and security measures. And this would be the last of our jury courtrooms to be upgraded, correct? Yes. And then our last year in our 5-year plan would be to update the courtroom gallery seating and the podiums in the remaining courtrooms that have yet to be upgraded. When we've upgraded courtrooms, we've not upgraded the gallery seating. We still have several courtrooms that have fabric seats, which with COVID are not beneficial. So these are some of the things we're looking at for '25. And obviously, again, these are cost estimates based upon previously received numbers. All in all, I feel that our court is operating very well. I hope you feel the same. With some well-needed attention to a few key areas, I think our efficiencies will increase greatly. And we truly do appreciate everything you do in assisting us to provide swift and fair justice to the citizens of Shawnee County. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
None.
Questions?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much.
Thank you.